Foldables are not a trend, they're here and they're here to stay. We've seen Samsung pioneer this category of smartphones with the flexible OLED displays via the Galaxy Fold and Galaxy Flip lines. Motorola entered the category as well as a few Chinese brands, notably Oppo and Honor. Now it's Google's turn to make a splash. Hey, what's up guys, BoHD here, and the kind folks over at Made by Google sent over the Pixel Fold to review. I've been using it as my daily driver for the past few weeks, while also testing out Mint Mobile. Shout out to Ryan Reynolds. And while this is technically a first generation device, it's surprisingly well polished. There were a few bugs here and there, but the hardware and the software both exceeded my expectations, which is really a must since Google is trying to sell this device with a straight face for $1,800. Now, typically I'm not much of a case guy, but I had to throw this phone in a case on day one because it's just too expensive and too fragile not to, in my opinion. And so you probably will as well. There's a slew of cases out there, but I recommend something from either Pitaka or Latercase, which offers some basic protection without adding too much bulk. I went with a Latercase this time around and found that it offers some basic protections from scrapes and scuffs, which is all I was really looking for, but don't expect much more than that from this case. Now, the Pixel Fold is bulky. There's no getting around it. When you consider the fact that you're literally holding a screen on top of each other, folded in on itself, it's going to take up a sizable amount of space in your pocket, making it more cumbersome to use while working out or using one-handed. That being said, it's marketed as the, quote, thinnest foldable phone on the market, in the US at least. It's 12.1 millimeters thick when folded closed and 5.8 millimeters thin while folded open, making it one of the thinnest phones on the market. I don't love the bulk it adds to my pocket, but I think it is worth the trade-off to have a pocketable 7.6-inch tablet ready to go with me. I also love how there's no gap between the inner display when folded closed like we've seen in some of the early day foldables. That definitely cuts down on some bulkiness. The specs of the Pixel Fold check pretty much all of the boxes one could expect in a premium flagship smartphone. There are dual 120Hz OLED displays, a 5.8-inch 2092 by 1080 panel for the outside panel display, and a 7.6-inch 22.8 1840 resolution inside display. There are stereo speakers with support for spatial audio that Google didn't talk about publicly, but can be turned on in the settings, which is pretty neat. It supports the latest Tensor G2 chip with 12 gigabytes of RAM that can handle just about any mobile game or application you throw at it. And we have 9.5 megapixel front and 8 megapixel inner front-facing camera sensors. Meanwhile, there's a 48 megapixel main and 10.8 megapixel telephoto and ultra-wide sensors. So you're not really skimping out on camera capabilities by going with a foldable, but more on that later. A fingerprint sensor is integrated into the power sleep on-off button on the side of the phone, and there's 30-watt fast wired charging with Qi wireless charging support. Nothing about this phone is mid in terms of specs, and the choice of stainless steel and glass make for a very well-built and very, I would say, sophisticated build, both in terms of looks and feel. That being said, specs are certainly not everything, especially for a foldable smartphone like this. It's really all about usability. The front display on a foldable like this is a must-have, and Google made a unique decision to add a front display with a 17.4 by 9 aspect ratio. In other words, it's a wider than normal display, and certainly wider than the front display on the Galaxy Fold. At first, I wasn't sure how I liked it, because it's not great for one-handed usability. My thumb can't reach across the display, making it harder to text one-handed. But the more I used it, the more I enjoyed having a slightly wider display for consuming content. You may think you're going to be using the inner display most of the time when you pick up a phone like this, but in reality, you're likely going to spend most of your time using this outer display. So having a large front display that doesn't compromise on resolution, refresh rate, or other specs is a must. It looks great, it functions well. Google did great here. Now, the reason Google went with a wider front display is because when you fold this phone open, it unveils a large 7.6-inch inner display with a 6:5 aspect ratio that gives you the closest experience to a dedicated tablet of any foldable on the market today. There is a slight crease when viewing the inner display, just about with any foldable nowadays, but you do stop noticing it after a while. It's not really a big issue in my opinion. Okay, now you can't talk about a foldable without talking about the hinge, and the Pixel Fold's hinge is pretty special. It features a custom-built 180-degree fluid friction hinge that can be opened completely flat with no gap and sports an IPX8 rating for water resistance. So you can submerge this phone in fresh water for up to 30 minutes and it should be completely fine, which is kind of insane. It takes some serious engineering to pull that off for a foldable. What's missing is a certification for dust resistance, so you will want to be careful in that regard. For what it's worth, I did take this to the beach on a crabbing trip using this phone to capture videos with sand flying around. If you're a big outdoorsy person though, it's safe to say that this is not the phone for you. And I said earlier it can open completely flat because it can, but only if you force it. It's actually a few degrees shy of that, which does have this sort of unpleasant effect of rocking around when using it on a flat surface. Not too much of a big deal, but worth mentioning. Okay, now what about the software? As for actually using the inner display, there is a slight learning curve for multitasking, I would say specifically with using the dock to run two apps side by side and for rearranging windows. But the more you use it, the more you'll unlock its efficiency and convenience gains. And I'm not a big mobile gamer, I pretty much just played chess. However, even chess is a fun experience on a big display like this. I've been using this phone for a few weeks, and the novelty of the tablet experience, even for chess, hasn't worn off. For a first generation product, Google, I think, has done a really great job shipping an operating system that takes advantage of both displays without too many bugs at all. But it's definitely not perfect. One of the biggest complaints being that Google doesn't let you visually customize each screen independently of the other. So the changes you make to the front display will be reflected on the inner display and vice versa. The Pixel launcher itself could also benefit from more customization options. It's functional as is, but very bare bones. Separate display interfaces, more icon grid layouts, support for custom app icons, hiding apps in the app drawer, and gesture support, among other features, would be much appreciated. You also can't set your own pairs for multitasking or have floating app windows so they can be moved around on your screen. Having the option to always have Chrome and YouTube or Chrome and Google Keep, for example, to be opened up at the same time would be super convenient, as would, of course, having a floating calculator window for doing some Excel stuff. There's also a bunch of apps that just don't support tablet mode, creating this super ugly black bar experience on the sides of each app. While this is on developers, it would be nice for Google to give us the choice to force these apps to take advantage of the full display by stretching them out to all four corners, even if it might look weird or function strangely. And then also, just generally speaking, I did notice the inner display to be slightly less sensitive than the outer display, especially around the crease. Having separate controls, I think, to increase sensitivity for just the inner display would be a nice touch too. Many, if not all, of these criticisms can be remedied with third-party apps until Google adds these features themselves natively. It's one of the many reasons to love Android. When it comes to battery life, there's some good news and some bad news. The good news is that it sports the biggest battery in the US market for a foldable. So if you use the Pixel Fold like a normal phone most of the day like I do, you can get through a full day of usage, ending the day with about 20 to 30% remaining and a little over 5 hours of screen on time, give or take, for the front display. However, if you plan on using the inner display most of the time, playing games or just browsing the web for hours on end, that battery life is going to not really last you that long. You're going to probably have to top this phone off by plugging it in or slapping it on a wireless charger. I don't think that's too much of a deal breaker for such a big, beautiful display and great experience, but it's going to be up to you. And the camera specs and features are still top-notch, even if technically the Pixel Fold has a smaller main and telephoto camera sensor size than what's available in the Pixel 7 Pro, which is due to how thin the Pixel Fold is. It's 5.8 millimeters thin and doesn't support those big, chunky image sensors. I was still able to capture some beautiful photos, though, with that signature Pixel look that is always a treat coming from another phone. It has wide dynamic range, it has quite a bit of detail, not as much as a Pixel 7 Pro, but still pretty good, and just good automatic white balance, which is always underappreciated. One of the best unique features for the Fold actually is the ability to fold open and flip the phone around to use the main camera sensor for selfies or for taking video. There are selfie cameras available both above the front and inner displays, but being able to use the main camera and all those sensors is really nice because you get a much higher quality image. And you also get a nice big viewfinder to line up your shot. The elephant in the room with the Pixel Fold is its exorbitant price of $1,800, twice the cost of the Pixel 7 Pro and probably the 8 Pro when it launches. So if you're on a tight budget, the Pixel Fold is definitely not going to be the phone for you unless you can find a carrier deal or a steep discount. I also find it hard to recommend for those of you who like to go hiking, hit the slopes, or just frequent the beaches. While this is one of the most durable phones on the market, it's still a fragile phone that is very susceptible to dirt and dust ingress around the hinge. There have also been reports of the inner display shattering within days of users receiving the phone. I've been fine, but it's something worth considering. Now, for those of you who have money burning in your pocket, have the budget for the Fold, and the curiosity for a new smartphone experience, I could recommend this device. It's a first generation product from a company that has a track record of canning products and services more than seemingly any other big tech company. But the Fold is a surprisingly well executed device at launch and will surely get better with future software updates and hardware iterations. The second generation of the Pixel Fold is probably the one most people should set their eyes on. I'm also hoping Google knocks the price down a bit to make it a bit more compelling. But I still do think people that have a big budget are going to enjoy the first generation Pixel Fold. It kind of makes me think of the Microsoft Surface Duo I reviewed almost 3 years ago now. This was a beautiful piece of hardware that gave us a tease of the future of mobile, but was plagued so badly by software issues that I labeled the phone unusable in my review, because it was. Thankfully, that is not the case with the Pixel Fold. Again, while this phone is not perfect, I'm glad Google took some time to really get this phone right and ship a tablet-sized foldable that is ready to compete against the Galaxy Z Fold line on day one. I'll place links down below in the description to learn more about the Pixel Fold and purchase one for yourself if you're interested. If you guys have any questions or concerns, please let me know down below in the comments section. As always, I'm BoHD from Slash.tv. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you right back here in the next one. See ya.